everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Well, this is a diecast review, a little bit unusual because I'm used to make some videos about the 124 series models, so it's very rare that I make a video about a 118 model like this or about 143 car if they are not something that I have to build up or commissions and so on. So this time I would like to show you this. This is one of the last productions by Solido. Solido is a French company specialized in die-cast models, and back in time they had agreement with Heller models. They are very spotted on the subject to reproduce in scale, and they started some years ago a kind of refurbishment of the company. Solido was quite old. I remember that in my first job in 1993 I was actually working to the Italian distributor of Solido, and they already had a very big distribution of these items all over the Italian territory, and in the last few years the company nearly disappeared, and also I lost completely the interest about Solido because I was not a modeling shop selling die-cast items. I was specialized in military modeling. And recently they had a kind of restructuring of the company with some guys that also are present on social media and so on, and they make very nice introducing videos about their new products. This is one of the latest. Then it is a Porsche RWB. As you probably well know, the RWB is a Japanese tuner, Nakai-san, that takes a model. In the beginning he made the first model that he made was over the 993 Porsche body. So it was the body of the 90s of the last air-cooled Porsche 911, and he made this huge enlargement on the body, made in fiberglass, that is just basically a body kit. So he changed completely the look of the model. I take it out from the box to show you better. Box is very steady. They also have this huge plastic display around the model that save, you see, the plastic that completely save the model from any kind of fitting during the moving. So as I was saying, Nakai-san was the first one that took the model 993 when the model was just an old Porsche. Now is a collectible vintage item, what they call it, young timer. Is one of the queens of the young timer, and because it was the last one taking the windshield and all the pillars from the original 911 series, the 993 have been, in my opinion, probably the nicest series they ever made over 911, And back in time, about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I think, something like that, they were not so precious like today, so they were just simply old Porsches, so nothing, it was still not an era where you can talk about young timer and old vehicle that became a classic and people searching for them, paying big money, I think the value of today of a complete original 993 is about 100,000 euro at least, depending from the condition and from the type of the 993 that you find. So back in time, Nakai-san was making a kind of huge transformation, cutting completely the fenders front and rear of the car with the electric saw, and place it over these huge fenders that don't resemble anything because they are just look like the GT2 version, that in reality were much more slimmer, but the GT2 cars were racers, It was what they call it, the GT2 Club Sport, and it was the model made in 124 by Tamiya. That is a specific series of the 993, but is a racer, it's a real car made in a few hundred of examples by Porsche directly for clients. And then it was the declination of the RSR racing in the 90s, the GT2. So this is just inspired to that models, because this is much wider than the GT2. As you can see, the body is very nice and very bulged, It was horrific the way he made the modification over the car, because being old models, he didn't have any clue of respect during the modification, so it was very easy to see how he can cut completely the metal of the original Porsche, and it was really heartbreaking, Let's talk about the quality of the model. The model is absolutely nice. They had this Smurf blue color, you know, that is typical. They are all specific model. There is only one for each client, you know. If I didn't understand wrong, Nakai-san, when he have to make a raw welt car, this RWB is named raw welt. I really don't know what does it mean, raw welt. Raw, it sounds like a raw welt, I don't know. And he basically come to your address and he stay with you, he sleeps with you, and he make the car in your garage or in your facility where you can make it, you know. And basically he changed completely the body panel, the wheels, that they became this huge reverse channel wheels with different central sprocket rims. There is like the BBS design, there is like the Speedline design, mostly copied and inspired to them. So I think that the wheel became, I don't know, many inch, it can be 18-inch deep. It's something really, really huge. Plus this fiberglass rear wing that really, really resemble the GT2 version of the original Porsche Club Sport. So basically the car is just tuning of body parts, you know. He don't touch so much in the inside of the car. I think at least the suspensions maybe, but neither that, you know, that suspension you can change in ordinary Porsche, you know, it's not such big work. And the model is really well done. The point is the price around this type of model, because until now, if you really wanted to have a model of a 993 RWB raw welt Porsche, you should go or for the 124 model made by C1 racing kit, that was a modification over the Tamiya model made by Chris from C1 Models, and you had to basically modify a 993 from Tamiya. Or you can take that was available on the market until a few years ago, then it disappeared, but it was a little bit tricky, you know. You can use the hobby design model, you know. The difference was that the C1 model provided you a full entire resin body, so you didn't have to do so many modifications over the body. The only issue, I made a couple of them, I think, the only issue that the model had, that was probably for the mold mistake or something went wrong in the mold, all the models of the C1 tend to have the front end pointing on the upper part, so you have nearly all this part that look like bended on top, with the light that became slightly different, you know, from the lower line of the front bumper, you know, that is not like in this model correctly parallel to the road. It's always a little bit pointing up, you know. Instead, the hobby design model featured all the body part like the real RWB, but it was extremely tricky because then you had to make a cutting over the plastic, and the resin part was nearly always completely wrinkled or deformed. You know, it's typical from resin, you know, it's very, very sensitive to temperatures and so on. So the alignment of the panels was nearly impossible. I've really seen very, very few models of the original hobby design RWB finished in a proper way, you know, also to respect when you cut the model from Tamiya, this line, this proportional from the real RWB. That Nakai-san made the mold, of course, of this part that he reproduced in fiberglass. I think it was also quite cheap in the beginning, where they were talking about $20,000 to make a modification just of the body part. Then actually being a kind of art masterpieces, the RWB, the value is much, much more higher today, you know, and very, very rare that you can find somebody that have the original made by Nakai-san for sale. So it's much more easy that these people that bought the kit or similar kits that became available on the market years after and made them by their own. So it really depends, like when you do a model, who is the maker of it. You can have an exceptional skilled body shop that do it for you, or you can have a really a desperado guy making something like that, and the car is completely off, and you see that the model is the car is completely wrong and completely mistaken, you know. What to say about the model? Model is a brick of die cast. There is some slightly minor details like that blue line, not so precise. They didn't. I already made a video about the 964 based RWB. Back in time it was the orange model, even from Solido. I buy them because they are extremely cheap. I mean, when you find a model like this, despite, as I said, I'm not a 118 guy, but the model itself costs about 40 euros, so it's very, very cheap. Consider that until today the only way to have a 993 RWB was to buy a GT Spirit model that cost around $200. If you find them, you know, little more detailed model, but mostly because the body part is completely in resin, I think, not in die cast like this. So I think is a great bargain price if you like this kind of the tuning Porsches. You know, I just like the 964, very aggressive, and the 993 to have the collection of the real Rauwelt. Then Rauwelt also made the 996 and the 997, and it went on modifications with the modification of the rear wing. Also because these are all cars that must be street legal all over the world. There is a lot in Thailand, in the Philippines, many in America, some in Europe, you know, in Austria there is some, but it's always a question mark because you never know from the rules of the country that you want to drive it in, if you're allowed to drive it on the road or not. For example, I know that in Italy until now there is no RWB, despite the model is not so special. As I say, the 993 in Italy, we had millions of 993, was one of the countries that bought the most the 993 in the 90s. I remember them so well around the road. But nobody today dare to do a modification like this, so huge, you know. So some people take the old 911 or 912 that now became ultra priced in the original configuration, because back in 10 the 912 were 1.6 liters, so it was ridiculous because you had a body that was completely 911 with the motor of a Volkswagen, so it was a ridiculous car for the time. You have to figure it out in 1969 when this was done, you know, not stuff in the 90s where the powers were already over 300 horsepower. I think already the 993, also the ordinary Carrera 2 version was a car with around 280, 290 horsepower, something like that, so it was quite huge power, you know. Modern Porsche, they have 600, 700 power, so 700 horsepower, so depending from the model that you choose, and the car became much bigger, it became like a truck, you know. This is about the real car. Let's talk about the model. Not so much to say, you know. There is just two big opening part about the doors. The rear bonnet is not openable, you know, completely stuck, so this is just a line of the mold. The details are present, but very, very simple, of course. This is basically a huge die-cast edicola model, you know, so the spots are not so well detailed. It's very, very simple, extremely simple, but extremely clean, you know. My model have an imperfection front there, you see. There is an imperfection there. There is an imperfection down there. So it's obviously stuff that have to be assembled in China for very, very few money, or in Bangladesh, you know. I don't know if on the box they write where it have been made. There it is. It's always the guys in Bangladesh making them. They became an incredibly skilled modeler soon. And so I think it's absolutely worth it, you know. There is some typical, this is probably a car owned by somebody. If you Google online who owned the Shingen, RWB Shingen, arrive surely some rich fellow from somewhere in the world, can be Thailand, can be the Philippines. So it really depends who is the owner. That had the lucky that Solido wanted to do the model, you know. Also the steering wheel is not the standard big one from Porsche, it became like kind of tuning. So you have to look this type of items, you know. And I personally do. For me is, as I said, the nicest modification ever over a 993. The only stuff that I would like to do here, as I did on the 964, that gives a lot of improvement of the detail of the car, is like the real one, to add the black lines all over the panel line and the fenders, you know. That became much more nicely to see the model, you know, when it is complete. All these lines that here are molded in the blue of the Smurf color, they can come to life if you make the detail with the scriber and the panel line. So there is a little detail to add. The same for the front end. This is typical in the real car. Nakai-san make this with black silicone because they like also the panel line that mark, you know, like in a cartoon, the lines of the modification he applied to the original body of the 993. Sad to see that, for example, the drop line that usually in the real 993 is quite marked, you know, is nearly invisible here. There is also, to be in 1/18 scale, you see some other imperfection on the line there. But once again, if you are talking of a model that cost €40, probably the fellow that sold me without any ticket, without any fiscal declaration, €40, also paid this one, maybe I guess €20. So the original price I think is $5 of this stuff, but it's okay. I mean, I have no problem with that. And that's it. There is also an imperfection on the roll cage, as you can see there, black spot there. These are very, very easy to see because, you know, when they build up the model, surely they have a kind of assembly line where they do the bodies, where they do the plastic, where they do the blacks, And usually all these parts in the real model are probably carbon fiber, or at least covered in carbon fiber. This part is metal, they are not in plastic. So the model is absolutely worth it, and as I say, I don't take so many models in 118, just the most important, also because they take a lot of space, and here I absolutely have no space at all for other stuff. My tip is, if you find something around $40 to $50 or euros, you can absolutely go for it without spending the $200 for a GT Spirit model. Solido really spotted on, and the model is absolutely fantastic, so let's take it. My tips. Thank you, and see you in the next video.